Welcome back to the Broker Room. I'm Boban, Jurisic, and today's guest is Fariha Chowdhury, co-founder and CEO of Arise Foundation. Thank you for joining us today, Fariha. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, Boban. Nice to be here.
So great to have you here. I mean, you've started the Arise Foundation to make it easy for financial abuse survivors to stand on their own feet. Now, tell us a little bit about, where you've come from, what you've done, your background, and why you started the Arise Foundation.
So in terms of my background, it's in finance and strategy. I worked in various multinational companies over 17 years, a chartered accountant. So prior to Arise Foundation, I was the interim CFO at the City of Parramatta Council and then the regional CFO at American Express Global Business Travel. Why I started the Arise Foundation, and it pretty much is with a friend of mine, my co-founder, Tasnia Alam-Hanan. Both of us, we saw someone that was close to us who went through domestic and family violence and how challenging it was for her to rebuild her life and the lives of her children. So we wanted to help. We were saying, what can we do to help? Besides being there as emotional support, we wanted to do much more than that. So we started looking into it, into the organization, and especially Tasnia working in government at the time, in New South Wales Treasury. So she had that government background to look into the policies. And what we found was there were a lot of organizations that were there at the crisis stage, helping the victim survivors, but there weren't many at the recovery stage. So you can provide temporary shelter, mental counseling, legal help, and quite rightly so. But what happens to these women 6 months, 12 months, 24 months down the track? So there was a bit of a vacuum in terms of that information or data. And additionally, as we looked more and more into the stats, which are staggering, what we found was there was an underlying factor in terms of financial security. One of the key reasons why women who want to leave and unable to do so, that's what they're citing as their reason.
Now, speaking of facts, I read somewhere that there were 623,000 Australians that have gone through financial abuse, coercive control, and it had a $5 billion impact to the economy in 2020.
Yes, annual. That's right.
Wow.
So that takes in, and that's a conservative figure because that's annual. That's not taking into your long-term, the long-term impact as well. It's not taking into impact that it has in terms of your children or other family members. Because, the cost is basically, your financial counseling, your affordable housing or providing temporary shelter, the health cost. So it's huge.
So if I could break it down for the listeners, what is in essence financial abuse?
So financial abuse is a type of domestic violence. It's basically a hidden pandemic in Australia, but it's actually now getting a lot of light shown across to it. So just very recently in New South Wales, coercive control has been legislated as a criminal act. And financial abuse is part of that coercion. The types of, in terms of, what is financial abuse? It's a way the perpetrator gain control over the victim through finances. So they control the finances. They may stop the victim from actually going to work.
Wow.
In terms of household spending, they will have no say in household spending. Also force them to go into debt. So these are, key types of financial abuse.
Go to debts on behalf of the
perpetrator.
The perpetrator.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, I'm a strong believer that we as brokers and finance professionals, we have a not only a legal obligation but also a moral obligation to make sure that we look after our customers and make sure not only that they're in a better off financial position, but also that they're not going through financial abuse and coercive control. What are the indicators and what should brokers be looking out for when they're sitting down with their clients? Because, as you can imagine, brokers sit down, they've got a full list of their financials, assets and liabilities. They sit in their homes, they can see the behaviors. What are the indicators and what should brokers be looking out for when it comes to financial abuse?
And brokers are a very important part of this conversation because in terms of financial abuse, that's one of the lead indicators before it goes into physical or sexual abuse. So what, things you can look out for are, do they have separate bank accounts? In terms of if they have joint account, does the both parties actually understand what's the meaning of going into a mortgage? You know, there is a recent report that has come out from Center of Women's Economic and Safety, which is called Design to Disrupt. And it's very recent, just came out end of November, where it's actually basically a report on the banking industry, how to change your behavior and how we can make sure that we are not making the process difficult for domestic and family violence and especially financial abuse survivors. So things you can check is to see, right, does the person actually have an understanding of finances? Are they being forced to sign the papers? When you do sign the papers, and one of the things at the origination that you can do is, when you're talking about the terms and conditions, one of the things you can say is, do you understand your liability? Because sometimes we give a generic liability and go, read the paper, come back, and if you have any questions. But just make sure they understand.
And it happens a lot more than you think, right?
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Exactly. So that, and also give them the option to say, if you do separate, here's a pathway in terms of what you can do to separate your accounts, Do you want to go have a joint liability? Do you want to go 50-50, another percentage? What other accounts are there to offset your mortgage? So these are some of the things you can do as a broker. But in terms of the indicators, just see, does this person understand? Look at the behavior between the two people. Is someone actually a bit scared? Are they just signing without reading? Yeah. So it's, absolutely, as you said, yes, there's the legal piece, but we do have the moral obligation.
Absolutely. And so what are the next steps for brokers? If someone does, for example, notice these behaviors, sees these indicators, what is the next step that a broker should take to ensure that their clients are safe?
One of the things is you can report it to the bank as well, so that they can put safety measures. So banks currently, I know there's obviously things are now changing. This is coming into shape. We now have 10 days, legislated 10 days paid leave for domestic and family violence, which is all fantastic. But we need to make sure that there's also policies and structures in place where people know how they're going to support the customers, right? So one of the things is, tell the bank. Brokers have this really good relationship as well with their clients. So, see if you can sometimes go, I've got a question for your partner. Can I meet up with you separately? There's just a few things I've got to run through. And so maybe instead of saying to them, why aren't you leaving? Be kind and listen. And more in terms of indirectly give them pathways in terms of how they can get out, because it's not like get out, it's saying to them, hey, by the way, here are some options on how you can leave this, because sometimes it's that financial abuse that deters them from leaving. Because if you don't have money and you're looking at homelessness or poverty,
you feel
what
trapped.
do you do? You feel trapped. And if you're also living with the perpetrator, how do you leave?
Now, in saying all of that, I read somewhere and I watched a couple of videos. You guys have partnered up with EY, which is amazing, and you're getting national recognition in terms of what you guys are doing. Talk to me about the academy that you guys have formed and how you are helping women get through these tough times.
So Arise Academy is one of our key products. We created that because we wanted to provide financial assistance as well as training and education and help women out of that be placed into paid employments, because for us, financial security is the key to long-term financial independence. So what we're offering there is a few products. One is driving school, where we get women to...
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so they get their ID, they get their independence, and also a lot of jobs are restricted because they don't have a driving license. So we help them get driving license. We've partnered with On-Road Recovery to get them to do that, and as well as a couple of other not-for-profit organizations, an alliance to get the women through that. We're also providing them with English. So while there are free TAFE courses for women who have English as a second language, but there's sometimes barrier in terms of visa restrictions. So we're offering that free in-house. Another one that we're doing is also basic digital literacy. So some women, they don't even know how to turn laptop or basic Microsoft and Excel, and you need that to work. And the key one is our Employment Ready program, which is an 8-week program, goes to financial literacy in terms of, understand your money. How do you manage it? What's the financial environment like in Australia, the superannuation, tax, giving that information, equipping them with it, empowerment and well-being, to make sure, because they're coming from trauma, ensuring that their well-being is right and how they're going to deal with it, giving them the tools. And lastly, foundational work skills. So resume building, interview skills, effective communication. These are all some of the items that we do. And then after that, they get access to mentors, professional mentors, and we help them to get into paid employment.
Wow, that's amazing work.
Thank you.
Now, holistically, if we look at the whole thing from a helicopter view, what can we do as an industry to stop and or prevent coercive control, domestic violence, financial abuse? What are your thoughts? Do you mind sharing that with us?
I would say, keep an eye out. You've heard about the indicators in terms of control. Someone will have control over someone's bank account. What can we do? Make it easy. Like with banks, talk to them, advocate to the banks and say, hey, let's not make it easy for perpetrators to use financial tool to hold power over someone else. Let's start to change the policy. We can talk, but if you don't take actions, then nothing's going to change. So even giving you an example, if you're opening up a mortgage bank account, say, part of that is we need to open up transaction accounts, individual transaction accounts with separate privacy settings. So as soon as someone says, hey, I'm a victim of financial abuse, you can immediately go, right, increase their privacy settings. So the other person can't see, where the location is.
Yes.
So, there's things like that you can do. Even looking at the transactions to see if someone says, look, I'm a domestic financial abuse survivor or domestic violence, immediately go and alert and say, right, what can we do to help? Contact the bank, alert the bank so that people know that, even if there's joint account, they can put a stop. Give you an example, the friend that had gone through financial abuse, when she had left the perpetrator, they had a joint account. And what she didn't know is that he had an individual account. So as soon as she left, he immediately transferred all the money to his account. So when she spoke, leaving her own with only $700 for herself and the kids.
Wow.
And all the monthly debit payment was going from her account. And she didn't know how to stop that. So when she spoke to the bank, they were supportive, but they said legally we can't do anything because he had access to that account. But we've now put a stop so you can, go through the other process with police and everything. But unfortunately, the money's gone. So I think with the broker industry, be aware, be kind, and not only in terms of with your services, customers, but also within your own organization. Have policies to say, okay, right, how can we help and put actions, talk about it.
Is there a particular demographic, I know you talked about ESL, so English as a second language, is there a particular demographic that you feel that is more impacted by financial abuse and coercive control than anything else? Or
right now, in terms of a cohort, we started with 3. We now have 48 people that's going through our program. And of that, 84% are actually from a culturally and linguistically diverse background. So the people from with ethnic background. Yeah. That's what we're seeing, but it doesn't mean it will stop with anyone, because what we are now starting to see as word is getting around about us, we're seeing more people like from eastern suburbs reaching out to us.
Wow. So
it will be interesting to see in the next year whether that number changes, the demography. But we also know, like, we've got 3%.
So not only are you helping people, you're actually breaking barriers, because people maybe in the East might not be as, they might be as reluctant to come and talk to you guys.
Yeah.
So you're also breaking down those walls as well in the process.
Yeah, because sometimes, people might say, oh, this person's earning high income, they're in a high exec, fantastic. Yeah. But what they don't know is their bank account is controlled by someone else.
Wow.
It could be. So that's the thing. It doesn't discriminate anyone.
Yeah, of course.
Like we've got 3% of our cohorts who are from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background. But, there was a recent documentary on SBS which basically showed that it's actually underreported. and they don't have access in terms of
Wow.
talking about it. Yeah. So one of the things, when we attended a New South Wales DV conference, Tasnia and myself, one of the key things that resounded with everyone was the fact that we offer our services online. So a lot of the domestic violence is
anonymous and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but a lot of the domestic violence specialist services or shelters, what they said was there's so many services in cosmopolitan area, but not in the regional or remote area.
Yes.
So for us, we know that's what our demographics are looking like currently, but we need to be reaching out to all of Australia to understand. But right now, we've got clients, Queensland, Melbourne, obviously because we started in Sydney, loads in Sydney and regional New South Wales. But it will be interesting once we are able to expand.
And what's stopping you from expanding? Is it just purely funding, people, resources? What's the...
Two things, you're absolutely right. The economics in terms of the funding, the resources. So we are growing so quickly in terms of our economics of scale that there's now a challenge in terms of how are we going to be able to manage the clients. Because we're trying to run the organization as well as manage the clients at the same time. The second piece is just getting the brand awareness out. So we do have Salvation Army and Good Shepherd as one of our referral partners. So they are national, but the Salvation Army is pretty much focused in Victoria and New South Wales, a lot of their clients, and Good Shepherd more so in Victoria. Then they're now expanding nationally, but they've started in Victoria. So I think for us, what's stopping us, it's that increase in brand awareness. And we know we can do it, but that what it would mean is we have to fly to the States, attend their conferences so people hear about us. But we've sort of went, let's go with the organic growth right now because it's just Tasnia and myself right now doing it all. So once hopefully we get that funding, we're just knocking on doors. So that will hopefully that
government
will enable
funding
us.
Hopefully.
Yes, actually, just before we came here, we actually had a conversation with Amanda Rishwood's advisors.
Wow.
So fingers crossed. As you saw, Natalie Ward was
she's the minister for...
She's the federal minister for community service, and she's the one who launched the national plan.
Yes.
To end violence against women and children, a 10-year plan. So we're hoping to be part of that conversation, and then eventuating that into funding. So that's fingers crossed. So we're just trying to get governments, we're trying to get corporate sponsors. We are hoping to do fundraising as well next year. One of the reasons we didn't do it this year is just because we had an online campaign. We just didn't have the resource.
That's fair enough. That's completely understandable. Fariha, that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining me, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks very much. It was fantastic joining you, and thanks very much for the coffee as well.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you.